Everybody, welcome to the USA Library's Art Gallery's Writer of the Week event. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We have an honor today. We have two wonderful writers joining us, Andrew Widener and Nicholas Widener. Widener or Widener?
Widener.
Widener, sorry. Widener. Andrew Widener and Nicholas Widener joining us today. They are going to share about their latest book, which is called Both Sides of the Road. Gentlemen, please take it away.
I'll go first. I'm the oldest. I'm Andrew Widener, and I'm a genealogist at Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington, D.C. I've worked there for 6 years, and for the past 10 years, I've researched our family history. And this book, Both Sides of the Old Road, is about the branch of our family history, the Bridges and Tucker families that I found the most interesting. They came to Alabama in the Bridges case before it was even a state in the 18-teens, into Mobile Harbor and up the Alabama River and settled in Wilcox County. And the Tucker family came overland from North Carolina with a two-wheel cart and a hogshead in a caravan of 50 families. So this book chronicles our fraternal odyssey discovering that lineage. And my brother Nicholas can introduce himself, but he was the photographic genius behind all the beautiful images in the book.
Wonderful.
So I am Nicholas Widener, and I am a teach film at Woodward Academy in College Park, right beside the airport near Atlanta. And I coach cross country and track as well. And I got my MFA in photography from SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And this book, Both Sides of the Old Road, is my thesis work. So it comes out of that. And I actually started shooting this series as really one of my very first projects when I was in graduate school. So the project was started 7 years ago. And so really kind of with the book coming out, that ultimately the conclusion to it. It was a little bit delayed because of the pandemic, as I think a lot of things were, but I had a couple thesis shows to first introduce the book, and in the project I always envisioned for it to be finalized as a book. So with the thesis shows, I had a version of the book, but after that had the opportunity to put it into more of a professional publication. And Andrew's always been in part of the process. He did all the research and kind of introduced me to the subject matter in terms of landscapes and people. And so it's kind of obvious for us to just collaborate and put together instead of it just be, one of our works.
Right. Fascinating. Well, can you tell us a little bit of the process?
Sure. Well, I think I'll just maybe start at the beginning. So in first classes at SCAD, we really were just making a project, and so it's completely open-ended. And so this project really started as me just going to different significant spots to our ancestry. So it actually included some other spots, not from this side of the family, but from other families in Georgia. And so it was originally just a series called Hallowed Ground, and it kind of had a bunch of different ancestral sites. And then it transformed something about just churches in the Black Belt. And all along I had been shooting a bunch of different portraits and different landscapes in the Black Belt. So after a number of trips, I think in total we went over there 15 times with a revolving cast of family members to shoot this project. It was about the time that I had to really kind of narrow down my thesis. It really began to come together, and for me to realize I had so many photographs from over there, and I just needed to continue shooting and continue hearing the stories that Andrew had found out about our relatives, and kind of continue to hear our grandfather talk about it. And then, of course, we'll talk about this a little bit more, I know, but to read a lot of the letters that our great grandmother wrote and all of the stories that she chronicled about the people and our relatives in the Black Belt.
So how did you get access to the letters?
Andrew?
I'll take this one. Our great grandmother, Grace Tucker Brayton, 1903 to 1998, was born in Lamison, Alabama, a town on the railroad connecting Birmingham and Mobile in Wilcox County. And Nicholas and I were visiting her when she was up in her 80s and 90s, and we were both extremely fond of her. And when I started doing genealogy research about 10 years ago, a cousin of my grandfather's, one of our great grandmother's nephews, Jim.
Oop, let's see if it refreshes. Let's give it a minute. It froze for a second, guys. Welcome to the South and the weather. Let's give them a second and see if it'll come back. Everybody, thank you so much for your patience. We were doing just fine, of course.
Don't forget to leave questions in the comments so that we can come back to them.
Oh, okay, lost a connection. They should join us back in just a minute. Sometimes this happens where they're located. They're in Georgia today, and because they're in Georgia, they have the weather going on right now, just like we do in the afternoon. So let's give them a minute to come back and join us. We don't give up easily with these things. So a little bit about his book. I can show you some of the pictures. Now we are featuring every day a different photograph, but I can show you, meanwhile, we can show you the promo for the day. This is one of the photographs. I believe this is her grandmother, their grandmother that they had talked with. I'm not quite sure. This photograph showed on Monday. And if you notice the old church and the location and everything, beautiful photograph. He's very talented. Nicholas is very talented with his photography. Still waiting for them to join us. This is the family Bible. And there are just the beginning of the photographs that are in their book. And their book is titled Both Sides of the Old Road. And they are the authors. Let's see if I can bring up the...
I almost used this photo for the promotion design, but then I found the photo of the old road to be more on theme.
If you're not from Alabama, this old road, the red dirt road, is very common here. And in the Alabama Delta, it's very, very common to find these roads and rural locations. They're beautiful, a lot of color. You see the red streaks everywhere when you drive out in the Alabama Delta area. Let's see. And then this is their grandfather, Thomas Brayton. And in the house that he was born in. Oh, there we go. Welcome back, guys. Hello, can you hear us?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We were going through your photograph.
Yes. Well, you never know with technology. We apologize.
That's okay. I agree. You never know with technology. I'm glad you made it back, though. It looks like you've got a good signal now. So let's hope this sticks it out. It's always about these southern storms, I'm telling you.
Oh, I know. We were just hearing thunder a minute ago.
Yeah, I know. We've been doing these at 1 o'clock forever, and so it's kind of like, oh no, the weather's becoming an issue. Okay, we were going through your photographs. What was it that you were finishing telling us?
Yes, so the letters have formed such an important basis of this work. They've really been guidestones along the path we've trod, and a source of inspiration and a unique knowledge that you can't find from any sort of documentation or record keeping. So we've collected over 130 illustrated letters that our great grandmother wrote, mostly to her aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews, cousins, and brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And she began writing them in the 1960s, and the last one she wrote just days within days of her death. And she was sharing stories that had been told to her by her grandparents, tales back to the early history of Alabama, interesting facts about her own upbringing, about the early days of the railroad in Alabama, about growing up on farms, picking cotton, about just very interesting history that you can't find in a lot of other sources that you get from oral and written history from down at the ground level. So we used a lot of her text in this book, and it has been a great discovery to have those letters.
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. Do you have them? Now, you work for the DAR. Do you have the letters there and archived there?
I have digitized all of them, and I have them in my own archive.
Okay.
I don't have all of the letters in hard copy because some of them are still in the hands of the descendants of people she wrote to, but they've been very generous in sharing them and letting me scan them.
Okay. Do you have it as a website available to access online, or is it still your private collection?
It's still my private collection because I'd like to do something further with them, but I definitely do intend to publicize them more widely.
Okay.
I wrote an article for the Alabama Genealogy Society magazine a few years ago that relied heavily on these letters, and so I'd like to explore that further.
Very cool, because that's a wealth of knowledge, and thank you for sharing it with everybody and talking about it today, because you can't repeat that kind of stuff, and that stuff, once it's gone, it's gone. So you never want to part with it or make it available, which is awesome. Is there anything else y'all want to tell us about your book before we go on to the photographs?
Sure. I was just going to say, in reference to the letters, sometimes when I wasn't sure how a photograph might fit, or, if there was a photograph in something, I would go back and try to reread some of the letters. And there were several times I asked Andrew about a place or a person, or maybe even, a story that our great grandmother referenced, and try to find a way to photograph that and kind of retell or reference that. So in some of the photographs, there definitely are some references to the stories that she told, and especially as we sort of intro the book with her letter, some of the references she made can be found in the photographs. So I think it was a very unique way for us to kind of tie that in, and certainly gets to the theme of photogenealogy that is present in the book, and how we would identify them.
A friend of mine that I purchased your book for a friend of mine and gave it to him, and he loved it. And he said, Paula, this is so amazing. He says, the pictures and the stories and the everything, it works together as like this big piece of art. And I was like, yes, it's a beautiful piece. He loved it. So yeah.
Thank you. It's very
Great
kind.
job. Great job. And he loves the Blackbelt area, even though he's not from here. He's actually from Chicago, and he moved here by Thailand, but he loved the book. So
Thank you.
I can start with, I'm going to move the photographs to the screen and let you tell us a little bit about them. Who is this lovely lady?
Well, I'll go ahead and explain who she is and how we're related to her, and then let Nicholas go into the background and process of the photo. That is our third cousin twice removed, Barbara Willis. Her great-grandfather and our great-great-great-grandfather were brothers. And she and my grandfather have remained in touch over the course of their long lives. And Barbara is the most gracious, emblematic Southern lady And we stay with her whenever we visit the Black Belt. She lives in Faunsdale in Marengo County, a town of about 100 people. And she's about to celebrate her 95th birthday. And so we want to wish her an early birthday on this live broadcast. But she is standing in front of McKinley Baptist Church, where many of our relatives are buried. And her parents are buried there also. And we visited there with her, and she and her younger sister, Jewel, are the only living members of that church.
Wow.
They open it once a year on homecoming, and it has a beautiful dark wooden interior and a lot of history.
Wow.
So Nicholas really likes this photo, so I'll let him talk about it some more.
Yeah, so this is actually the first portrait I took in this series, and I tried to re-photograph her once or twice, and it just didn't work as well as this image. And I think this image just works perfectly for her, and ended up working so well for the series because of all that history that Andrew's talking about the McKinley Baptist Church, and about her being one of the only two people still members of the church. But also, I just love how I was kind of able to get all of her and the tree in the church. And I tried to photograph people throughout this series, throughout the book, in a spot that was significant to them. There's one of our relatives that I photographed at a nursing home, and he's since passed. But for everybody else, they were really kind of in a spot that was significant to them, and really represented a place in the Black Belt near their home that kind of embodied them and what they liked about the landscape. And so I think that one thing also about Barbara is she and I also share a birthday. So I think that's kind of interesting to be that much older. And Andrew has always said interesting stories about her. So before I ever met her, I kind of had an inclination of who she was. And she really just is such an interesting character. So this is definitely one of my favorite shots in all of the series.
I really like the perspective of the shot where the building is kind of encompassing her as a person. And I think it really helps with your theme.
Thank you. Yeah, and since this was one of the first ones, I even changed cameras and changed lenses because this was so early in the series, and it ended up just still working so well, despite all of those changes throughout the series.
Did you actually say you need to wear a red shirt or something like that to have greater contrast, or did she do that on her own?
Yeah, so for everyone that I photographed in the series, I actually really didn't tell them what to wear.
Okay.
It ended up working out very well. There's another relative that I shot who's wearing an Alabama sweatshirt, and it just looked so good, and the red just pops. So there's a lot of references to red. There's a number of images with red in the series, and I think that kind of ties some of our themes together, about blood and about lineage.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very, very cool. So let's move on to the next one, the family Bible, and there's your red theme right there.
Right.
So
Yes.
Tell us about this.
This is our great-grandmother Grace's Bible. It's now in our mother's possession, and it's one of the most cherished heirlooms that our mother has to remind her of her own grandmother. It is, as you can see, extremely well worn. It belonged to her for many decades, and of course she cherished it and read it cover to cover. And all of the miscellany and marginalia are preserved inside it. Verses she circled and underlined, notes and prayers that she had inserted into it. And of course it has a family tree in there also. And so it's a very prized possession in our family. And it's sitting atop a quilt that we believe her mother, our great-great-grandmother, made toward the end of her life. And this is just one side of the quilt, and the other side of the quilt is completely different. But we wanted to juxtapose those two images, and I'll let Nicholas talk a little bit about the process and idea behind that.
Yeah, so I think that, Andrew and I probably collectively kind of came up with the idea to put objects on top of quilts. So in the book, there are 4 distinguishable chapters, and in the back we kind of give the chapters names. And so each one at the beginning of the chapter has a different archive photo on a quilt. But we wanted to start out with her Bible because the book uses a lot of different references to verses she circled, and all the verses present in the book are photographs of her actual Bible. So it was important to include those because they held a special significance for her, and it wasn't necessarily just the verse that worked with them, but it was the verse from her Bible that worked. And so laying this out first as sort of a reference to the Bible and to her possession and possessions that even preceded her was another way of kind of getting into this story besides her letter. And this is one image that begins the book, and in the back of the book, we open the Bible to the New Testament. So it's kind of an interesting way to contrast beginning that story and then showing that the story still continues while referencing the past.
Yeah. Do you know if it's feed sack quilts that the quilt is made up as feed sack material?
I don't know. We have a cousin who quilted with our great-grandmother's mother, and if we get the chance, we need to ask her that.
Yeah, my own grandparents were immigrants from Sweden here. And so that was very popular back then. I have a few of those quilts myself, and it looks like a similar pattern to those.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. So the feed sacks, they would make little girls' dresses, quilts, and a number of other things out of them. So,
yeah, well, that's a great indication that they used whatever materials were at hand.
mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, and then this photograph.
You want to start on this?
Yeah, sure. So this is our grandfather, Thomas Brayton. And this, I probably usually will go to saying this is my favorite photograph in the book because it's our grandfather. And I had the chance to photograph him in the home he was born in. And Andrew can be a little bit more specific in a minute about the date of the home and, how it was built and everything. But I think just kind of that opportunity to be in that house with him, even though it's pretty derelict now and obviously not in good shape. We were kind of moving across boards that were, some missing to get to that point. But he was very patient and stood there. And usually I don't think that, he would want to wait to have his portrait made for so long. But he's also wearing a hat like one of our other ancestors wore in some early photos. And I think that just kind of tied things together. Mm-hmm. It was just wonderful to be in that space with him. And we drove from our house, from his house and my parents' house straight there. And that was the first photographs we took that day. So we spent a lot of time in that house together, just he and I, and I just kind of have a very special memory of that moment. But I also think photographically, it really kind of ties everything together because he's our link, Andrew and I's link to the Black Belt and to our ancestors there, because he's our last ancestor to be born there. So my mom wasn't born there. But he was, and they left when he was about 5. But he returned very often and still, of course, returned with us pretty often. So he definitely keeps up with everybody there. And Barbara, the portrait we saw earlier, he talks with her very often on the phone. Mm-hmm. So they keep up. But I know Andrew can kind of talk about the house just a little bit.
The house was built in 1887, and it's a vernacular-style farmhouse. It's just south of Thomaston, Alabama, which is on the railroad between Selma and Linden. And the town wasn't actually there when the house was built, but our grandfather Thomas's grandparents bought the house in the early 1900s when Marengo County High School was built in Thomaston, so that their children, including our great-grandmother, could have a formal education, which of course they had not had. And so in 1938, our grandfather was born in the blue room of that house. And we had always pictured it as being kind of baby blue, appropriate for a little baby boy. But when we finally saw that it was this sort of faded seafoam green, it was kind of surprising that that was what they referred to as the blue room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the paint has changed over many decades of exposure, and the house is indeed near collapse, and it is a hazard to step inside it. But every visit, we go back to the house, and it's always kind of a focal point for our journey through the Black Belt. And the next door neighbors own the house, and they live in a modern structure, and will always say, oh, it's the Tucker family and their descendants when they see people prowling around the house.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, do y'all still own the property, or is it already passed out?
No, they sold it back in the 1950s, and it has not been in our family since then. But if it hasn't collapsed, then maybe the royalties from this book will allow us to buy it back.
Best of luck with that. Hopefully so.
And then one more thing about this photo, just because I'm seeing the wood. So on one final trip for this project, we went over there and we pulled a bunch of wood out of the house. They of course gave us permission to pull it out, and so we actually framed the entire show in wood from this house. So both our father and our uncle are very savvy craftsmen, and so they were able to create frames from all the wood. So the whole series was framed in wood in this house.
That's amazing. That's such a deep connection too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see, and we have one more. So what can you tell us about this? We know it's an Alabama road because it's red.
You want to go ahead?
So I mean, this is the road to the old Gastenberg Cemetery, and so this was one of the many back roads that we traveled. This specific one, this trip, I know I was with my mom, but we would go down a lot of these old roads to see the cemeteries where our ancestors were buried, and this really just kind of felt like that old travel, that we were following a road that our ancestors went down. And I think a lot of the roads traveled that we went down, both Andrew and I, throughout this project, just seemed like they were maybe much older than, much older than they maybe were, but they just felt very storied. Like there was definitely a story present, that our ancestors were on this road, and we could kind of feel their presence. And I think this photo, along with a lot of the other landscapes, have really sort of helped me to cultivate my topophilia for the South, and the love of that land that we're part of. And I think this is one of those ones where I could really sort of feel the connection to the land and the landscape.
Well,
Yeah,
go for it.
I think what distinguishes this particular landscape from a lot of the others is that, in contrast to the generally flat expanses of Black Belt prairie land, this one shows that it's a bit hilly, and the road bends upward onto a hill, and the Gastenberg Cemetery and church are up on a little hill. And our fifth great grandfather, George Fluker, and his wife are buried there. He was a soldier in the Revolutionary War. And his granddaughter, America Fluker, lived from 1849 to 1939. And there are still some people around who remember seeing her. And I love hearing those stories, because their memories go back to someone who was born in 1849. And it just is an amazing link with the past.
Wow. So you talked about a future project. What would that entail, Andrew?
I would love to do something with the letters, because I have indeed heard from many people who would like to see them curated, transcribed, explained, and reframed for scholarly use, but also literary enjoyment. I'm still collecting them. I know of particular letters that exist that I have not gotten my hands on yet, and so I'm occasionally contacting relatives who might happen to have them, and as soon as I get my hands on them, I scan them to make sure that they'll be preserved and not lost.
Well, that's wonderful. It looks like you'll have another
I also
project.
have a huge archive of old photographs, several hundred, that I would like those in a more extensive. Nicholas can talk. Yeah, definitely about how we may want to extend this particular format into other avenues.
Yeah, so we kind of feel like maybe each branch and each side of the family, there is some sort of story to tell, and maybe not in the same way this one was told, but in a way how how each has its own each side of the family, and preserve those stories.
Very, very cool. So so you have this future projects coming up, which is great. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we're done? There's a little lag there. Can you hear me?
Well, we pay tribute to our.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yes. Yes, the weather.
Okay, great. We want to pay tribute to our ancestry with this book, and we have so many family members that we love in the Black Belt, and it has such an interesting history, culturally, geographically, in terms of literature and cuisine, and we just hope that anybody who encounters this book will visit the Black Belt, visit Alabama, and appreciate its deep and abiding history and people.
Okay. I usually end presentations with one question. If y'all had a bit of advice to give to a college student today, specifically, for us as University of South Alabama students, what would that advice be?
I think it's important to try out different things in your area of interest. I went to school and got my undergraduate degree in journalism and minored in photography, and I was really able to even after college work with a newspaper, but then I kind of realized photography was a bit more of a calling. So I think that you just really have to pursue what interests you in college and take advantage of everything on your campus that you're able to, in terms of clubs or majors or anything. If it interests you, it's worth pursuing, and you can kind of continue to develop that. I think it's not too late, whatever stage you're in.
And I would just say, take advantage of the amazing human resources that most colleges benefit from. The faculty and staff are there as amazing sources of. Take advantage of that great opportunity and go to class.
Great advice, guys. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. I have placed in the post the website to your book, but tell us one more time the title of your book and where they can purchase it. It's getting there. It's a
You
little
can
lag.
purchase it on my website, williswidener.com, or at ain'tbad.com. It's ain't-bad.com.
Okay, cool. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very